We came from a world that required our muscles, went into a world that required our brains, and are moving into a world that requires our hearts. We're moving into an era of emotions, and where suddenly we're all trying to connect with one another. And in that world, someone's ability to sacrifice themselves or to suffer has very little value. Stories are collections, ordered collections of symbols that are at the same time ordered collections of emotions. And everything that's in your brain, just everything, is a story, always a story. The Big Bang is a story, and the evolution of the universe. We ourselves, humans, see ourselves as a story. So stories are the way we think. Around 2013, the Bank of England started noticing that productivity was not growing anymore. The thing that brought us here, the thing that made our lives possible, is not working anymore. We have been telling ourselves that the world was going to keep growing and growing and growing and growing forever, and that everybody would have the chance to jump on that bandwagon sooner or later. So what the economists are saying is that it's not going to happen. This is what we have. The world's not going to grow again, and we're stuck.
So why do you think that is happening?
I've been studying this for the past 5 years, and I think it is precisely for that reason. Profit depends on scarcity. The world in the making is a world of abundance, is a world in which we're not constrained by scarcity anymore. And that comes with lots of opportunities, but it also comes along with challenges because our entire social hierarchy relies on scarcity and how we deal with scarcity.
Hi, and welcome back to New World in the Making. In this episode, I'm joined by María Álvarez, journalist, writer, and serial entrepreneur. We talked about the narratives shaping our lives, the ones we're beginning to question, the ones breaking down, and the new ones emerging. It was a conversation that really made me pause and reflect on how we live and what we believe in. And also, it opened up a sense of possibility, a reminder that we can actually rethink, rebuild, and choose new stories with courage. I left with even more questions, and I'm already looking forward to having her back on the podcast when her book comes out next February. So let's dive in. Welcome, María. Thanks so much for joining today.
Thanks for having me.
I'm very excited to have another woman on the podcast. Maybe would you start with a little bit more of your personal background story? How did you come into this place right now?
Into being. Well, I would say I'm at the same time the most normal girl out there, and also kind of a rarity. Because I come from a very common background here in Spain. I'm a middle class. I was a middle class kid. Nothing special. I grew up in one of the neighborhoods that were developed in the 70s and the 80s to allow for all the people that were moving from the countryside to cities. And I think the first thing that made me different, was that I became obsessed with computers and with technology when I was very little. At first with a computer that my father had got, and then through video games, and then when I was a little bit older through software. So when I went to college, I did not pay much attention to college, but I did join a group of hackers that were discussing and getting involved into the free software scene at the time. So I started living this kind of dual life where I had the extremely normative, standard life of a middle class person in Spain, and at the same time being involved in all of these avant-garde movements that were starting to happen in the early 2000s around technology. And then in the 2008 financial crisis, I was something like 25 years old, and I got fired from the job that I had at the time, like everybody else in this country and of my age. And I decided, probably it wasn't really a big decision, but I didn't want to go back to work, and so I became a businesswoman. And that's how I started. Like, that was my second step into becoming something different from the mainstream, because then I was an entrepreneur, a female entrepreneur, and a very young one with a background in technology. And from that point onwards, I created like 3 companies that then I went on to selling. And through this journey that was parallel to the rest of my generation and the rest of the regular people, say, but slightly separated from them, I started having, I think, like a perspective on our lives, on the lives of ordinary people. But a perspective that is at the same time coming from the inside, like I can't really be an outside spectator. I'm always going to be that girl that grew up in a neighborhood in Madrid. And so a few years ago, like in 2020, I'm autistic, by the way. And I have this obsession with data and numbers and facts and finding patterns in pretty much everything I see. By 2020, I started to notice how everything around me was kind of crumbling, like these dream, this utopia of the middle class that I had grown up in was just not working. And you could see the signs everywhere, like if you were paying attention, you could see people that had apparently got everything that they should have got and they were unhappy, or like these expressions of malaise everywhere in the world. Like you could see people hurting in the north of England for the same reason that other people were hurting in the north of the United States or in a neighborhood in Spain. And so on top of being a businesswoman, I started researching what was going on and putting in a lot of effort and attention and time into understanding what was happening in the world. So right now, I would say I'm an analyst, if that makes sense.
Interesting. Yeah. Love that. So many questions I have already. Okay, so maybe let's start with when you decided to become an entrepreneur, a female one. Were you scared, and how did you manage to do this?
I was scared because everybody was scared at the time. So these were the years where it looked like you were going to fall off a cliff, like um, we had grown up thinking life was going to be linear, it was going to be like a progression.
Yeah.
And at one point, everything collapsed and nobody really had like a map, like a path forward anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so everybody was scared because suddenly life became so fragile. Everything became like the possibilities of falling off a crack on the ground and not getting back up to where you were supposed to be. It was a real possibility. And at the same time, I started working when I was in second year of school of college. And so I had been working for quite a few years by that time. And I hated working because it is really, really hard to work in a corporate environment when you're autistic. It's just not the place
Why?
where you want to be. Office politics are a torture, a nightmare, and it was not my place. So I was scared of the situation. I was scared of having to go back to work But I was not really scared of becoming an entrepreneur because it was the best of options out there, really. And there's one thing that I think is still true, which is that, like, to build a company that generates, like, say, several million euros of revenue per year is hard. It might not be for everybody, but creating a company or a lifestyle that allows you to make the same amount of money that you would make working for somebody else. So, like, replacing a salary with your own income, that is not hard.
Mm.
That is, I think, a possibility for everybody. So the thing is, often when we talk about entrepreneurship, we think it has to be either 0 or 100. We have to be either failing and going back to work, or following the steps of Bill Gates. But I think there is an in between that I would recommend to everybody, really, which is just try to replace the income that you get from an employer with an income that you can get by yourself. Because ultimately, in this world that is so uncertain, that is the safest bet that you can make. So there is no employer that's going to give you more safety, more security, more stability than knowing that you can generate the income by yourself, and that you can be a one-person company if you want. So once I got to that point, and it didn't take long, like, I paid myself a salary from day one, suddenly you're free in ways that many people don't understand, like free to do whatever you want with your life. That is the one luxury anybody could aspire to, I think.
Mm. Wow. What kind of businesses were these?
So the first company was it was actually an agency, a communications agency, because that is what I had been doing in the corporate world. So, like, it was a kind of turning your job into a freelancing model, which is something that many people do, right? And then I realized I was, like, moving from having one boss to having 10. You don't want to do that. And so that company evolved into an events company. We started managing venues to host events. And that was very profitable for many, many years. And when that company was already running and generating like 7 figures, we created another company that was a hospitality one, so a restaurant chain. And over time, when both those companies were generating 7 figures and were consolidated, I realized, and I talked about this quite a lot, that the place where value is being created and exchanged in our current society is the cities. And so pretty much everything that becomes valuable is because it gives something to the city, right? So it contributes to the value that a city is generating. And so I started my third company, which I still own, that develops buildings, old buildings, so that they're capable of hosting new ideas. There's this lane by Jane Jacobs, who was a very famous urban planner. And she said, new ideas need old buildings, because to host new ideas, to have that spark where innovation can occur, and where new connections can happen. You can't do that in a super new mall that's just been built. You really need the energy of things that have been there for many years and that bring you with them to new possibilities, something that hasn't been planned, that hasn't been designed exactly for one purpose. So I do that. I renovate buildings so that they can host new ideas, and I create projects, urban projects for new ideas to spark in the city.
Wow, I'm so fascinated. This is so cool. And with what awareness you're doing this. And wow, I mean, I think a lot of us would be scared to start something like this, and not just, I mean, you started not just one, like 3 businesses. And would you say, do you need any sort of, I don't know, special skills, investment? How did you do that?
I really had no investment at the beginning. And I think it's actually a good idea to not have any investment, because any investment that you might have, you're going to waste it. Because at first you don't know what you're doing.
Right.
So it is a good idea to start very little. But from like today is the perfect time to start a small thing. Like to create a website, you can create a website with no knowledge, with no prior knowledge, to try selling one product. There are lots of books that are going to tell you how to do this. I recommend somebody called Amy Hoy, who's a entrepreneurship trainer, teacher. She's amazing. Teaches you how to ship and like how to start launching one product after another for as long as you can, until you learn how to do it well, which is pretty much how we learn anything, how we learn to play football, how we learn to draw. We do it and do it and do it and do it until we acquire the eye for it and the smell for it and the skills for it. So I would say the skill that's most needed and that we usually lack the most is courage and the capacity to fail and to be willing to not do it well. So it is the same for drawing and for playing football, really. What do you need to learn to play football? You need to be willing to be really bad at it for a very long time or for some time. And you need to be willing to do that. And you need a community that when you fail and you end up face down in a puddle, they're not going to like make fun of you or shame you, but they're going to say that, yeah, this is normal. Like you're learning to play, and sometimes you stumble and you fall and you break your nose, and that's what happens when you're learning to play football. And that is what happens when you're learning to do anything else. So I do think that there's one thing that is keeping us back right now, for many people, which is that we've been taught so hard to never fail. So we're like trying to get to a point where we don't fail and then stay there as long as we can, terrified of going anywhere else. This is why people stay in their jobs for so long. This is why people waste their lives, really, because they're afraid to go into the next thing. But when you just get used to not caring, can't really explain it in any other way, like not caring what other people think, not caring if they think that you're failing, that's what makes everything else possible for anything in life, like finding your own style, like personal style, or playing football or starting a business. It's all the same. And sadly, it is something that is often not taught and even discouraged when we're like in school, high school, college, whatever. So we do have to learn that by ourselves.
Right. Right. I mean, it's really fascinating, and it's very encouraging to hear you talk about this. And it gives us back some agency, right? And something like, okay, no, actually, maybe I can do something, right? Maybe actually there is something that I could add and provide value for. I would love to come back to this, and in what areas you think we could be creating more things and new ideas. But first, I would love to talk more about your articles, because I was reading a lot of them and I was just enjoying them a lot, because you're just opening up so many different views and possibilities. And yeah, I mean, you write about a lot of different things. Maybe let's start with the narratives, social narratives that we have and mostly are even not aware of that we have them.
Yeah. So one thing that we really need to understand about human brains and about human cognition is that we are not really rational beings. That is not what defines us. Rational, we usually associate rational with machine, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you get some input, you do some calculations, and there's always a result that is factual and known and objective. That is in no way how our brains work. The way our brains work is that we, like all other species, are emotional beings. So the matter, the thing that our brain works with are emotions. Emotions like love or hate, but also emotions like house. So home is an emotion. It's when you say home in your brain, there are all these many um like lights that turn on, right? Like that connect to your mom, to the place where you were born, to a sense of coziness, to a sense of protection, to a sense of familiarity. For other people who had a bad experience in their house, in their home, it might mean something else, some other emotions. There's like a constellation of things that this idea brings forward. So when we first got language, what we got was a method to put a name, like to link those emotions to a symbol, to like a little bit that we can send to somebody else. So suddenly, we that are emotional beings could put all of these emotions into envelopes and send them to another person through language. This is why we say that language is symbolic. So the word horse does not is not the same as the horse itself, right?
Yeah.
And horse is an emotion. Horse is it's a concept that evokes and elicits lots of different connections in our brain to nature, to certain smells, to certain memories, to whatever a horse means for you in your mind. Now, the complexity of all this is sheer, massive. It's unthinkable. And so the way that we have found to give order to all of this is to create stories. So stories are collections, ordered collections of symbols that are at the same time ordered collections of emotions. And everything that's in your brain, just everything, is a story, always a story. The Big Bang is a story, and the evolution of the universe. We ourselves, humans, see ourselves as a story. We never explain ourselves as, here I am, and this is how much I weigh, how tall I am, and the exact color of my skin, and the exact measure of my ticks from one to the other. That would be a machine. That's how you explain a human to a machine. What we do is we say, I am a Spanish woman from a middle class background that became somewhat special at one point in my life. And so stories are the way we think in absolutely every single field that we can think of. As societies became more complex, these stories also had to become more complex to encompass all of society, because when people were living in family groups for 99% of our existence, they only needed one story for the people that were in that family group, say 30 people, 100 people, 50 people, something like that. And then one story about everything else, say it was us and then the rest. So it was kind of easy. You could also put names onto that story. It was a story about that our brain was able to comprehend in itself. But when society became more complex with the like agricultural societies and all of that, suddenly we needed other stories that could explain not just our existence, but the existence of all of these people around us that we didn't know, and we didn't really have a way of knowing. Like, we couldn't possibly meet everybody in Rome in the year zero, year one, when there was probably, like, say, 500,000 people in Rome. It was impossible for us to know in the sense that humans need everybody in that group. So we
Wow.
started creating stories that gave sense of huge populations. The first ones were religions, and that is the whole purpose of religion, is to explain the community. Why are all of us here? Because there's God, because we're the chosen people, because, and also to explain and to give to offer like milestones and thresholds to measure other people. So, is this a good person? Is this a bad person? Can I trust this person? Can I not trust this person? And so religions were a way to make sense, to give order to those emotions that we had and that now needed to be a lot more complex. There's a very good book that I think you've read too that's called The Day We Invented Reality by Javier Arguello, where he goes over all of the ways that we have done this over time, right? Like how we have defined reality and how we have defined morals and what's good and what's wrong over time. But apart from religion, there was philosophy, there was poetry, there have been many ways in which we have tried to give sense to the world through stories. The last one, the one that we're still living in, is this idea of the industrial society and the role that effort plays in it. So one of the things that I argue is that when religion became insufficient to explain the world because society was becoming more and more and more complex in the 18th century, we needed a yet more complex and more um, precise way to make sense of an increasingly complex world.
Wow. Okay. So many questions. How do we transition then from these narratives? How does it happen? How do we let go of old ones and adapt new ones? And because right now we're seeing more and more complexity, right? So I guess we are outliving some narratives that we could maybe let go of and adapt new ones. Which one would those be that we could maybe release and maybe they don't serve us anymore? And how would we transition into new ones?
So the last time that happened was when religion was replaced by rationalism and the industrial society and all of that in between the 17th and the 18th century. And I would say what happens is that the old story starts to not, it stops working. So you observe reality and you try to use the old story to understand it, and it doesn't work. And so people start becoming really angry, disoriented, and confused and scared, really terrified, because they're trying to make the world work and it doesn't work. And we can see this in a very specific way right now with children and education, and how lots of parents are sending their kids to an education system that doesn't work anymore, does not guarantee that you're going to be successful in life, that you're going to have the things that you need in life anymore. And so they know that it's not working, because it is obvious, because you can see it in employment figures, you can see it in achievement figures, you can see it in many, many places. But at the same time, they don't understand why. Why is this not working? And so we see a lot of frustration, a lot of fear, a lot of confusion. And I'm hoping eventually new stories start to arise and people start to think of the world in different ways, as it happened with the Industrial Revolution, and like giving other people like the tools that they need to understand the new world and make better decisions. Because I can't get myself to believe that we're going, like we're say going into a worse place. If we look at the hard data, every indicator, if we were Martians, if we were aliens from Mars, and we were observing the humans and like taking notes of what's working for them and what's not working for them, in every hard indicator of progress, we're making huge advances. So like life expectancy is going up. We're finding cures for illnesses that we never thought we would cure. We're getting so good at building things that we need with ease. Where energy is becoming abundant, knowledge is everywhere, and for now, we seem to have reached a consensus in which we learned from the mistakes of the 20th century, and we recognize that war is a horrible scenario for everybody, and nobody wants. So objectively, we're going into a better place, but because we don't have the stories and the narratives to explain the world to the people, there's a big part of the population that are struggling and that are really scared, and they feel there's this like notion that the world is becoming a better place, but some people are not like reaping the results, like they're not getting their part in that success, or that they're going to fall behind. They're going to be left behind.
Yeah, they're kind of not part of that progress.
Yes.
They feel like, they're not. Yeah, for sure. Why do you think that all this is happening? Because you were saying like, okay, the old stories don't serve us anymore, but why not? And what is what we are missing?
I have a theory that goes as follows. The people of the year 2025, we're the product of the past 300 years of history, or more or less. So there was a point in history where, as Yuval Harari says, we acknowledged that we were ignorant about the world, humans. And so we started a quest to become less ignorant. And so that was the scientific revolution. So we started to try to understand the world. And that happened in a very small part of the world, which is where we live, in Europe. And it created an effect that I believe won't happen again, which is that a lot of knowledge to make a lot of things was restricted to this part of the world for a couple of centuries. Okay. So throughout all of evolution, human knowledge was pretty much shared in between communities. So if you lived in a community, say, of 50 people in like the prehistory, or if you were living in a town of 2000 in the year 1000, the knowledge of the community was shared. Everybody had the same knowledge to make wool, or to make clothes, or to make bread, or to build a bridge, to build a house. Specialization was very rare. And so the reason why there wasn't really any any commerce, any exchange, was because if everybody knows how to make the same things, there's no point in exchanging.
True.
You can trade a couple of things. I make bread, you make clothes, and then we trade. But if we observe how those societies worked, people made pretty much everything in their own households. And this was the same if you look at the country. So all the countries were self-sufficient. They shared more or less the same level of knowledge, and there was no international trade. For just like blink of time, during the Industrial Revolution, Europe gathered an amount of knowledge that allowed them to create things that the rest of the world couldn't create. And so that was the spark for the Industrial Revolution. So suddenly we could build cars and light bulbs and coal and all of the things that we could sell, not just to the people in these countries, but to many people outside of those countries. But then, over time, what happened was that same society that had that was increasing the amount of knowledge within itself brought knowledge to a level where everybody in the world, again, has the same knowledge as it was happening before the Industrial Revolution. So in 2025, every country has the same knowledge. And not just that, but like the amount of knowledge that we're building day to day right now, it's unbelievable. Like I think the content of the internet double every year or every 2 years or something like that. So it's exponential,
Yeah.
And there are more people. This thing that you're doing here with this podcast, it would have been unimaginable 10 years ago, not even 20 years ago, 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, probably. You wouldn't have been here. If you had been born 10 years ago, maybe you wouldn't have been here. So it is very likely that 10 years from now, every single person in the world will have their own podcast. And having your own podcast will be part of your life, like something that you do in the same way that women, I don't know, knit sweaters 50 years ago as part of their life. So suddenly we've become this society of intellectuals. And that has an effect on the economy, two effects. One of them is that lots of things that we needed the industry to solve for us in the past. So to access somebody like you 20 years ago, I would have needed to turn on the TV.
Right.
And behind that, or the radio, and behind that, there was a massive structure of people making salaries and buildings and cameras, and it was a whole thing. Well, now you can do this with your own energy. You don't need anybody.
No,
You're creating a value that is equivalent to that of whatever my parents watched in 2000 without the economy. You barely need anything from the economy. So all of these intellectuals are taking huge swaths of the economy out of it and into another field that I called plutonomy, because it's like the economy of knowledge, an abundant economy, where there's no economy anymore. There's no need for that. And at the same time, there is no need to trade and to exchange anymore, because we're living in a world that is very similar to that of the tribes, where everybody knows how to do everything. And so nobody needs to buy cameras from China or cars from Germany, because every country could, if they wanted to, build cars and cameras. So the reason why the reason why I think this is the root of the mental health crisis and the far right emergence is that nobody has explained this to anybody. Nobody has said, we're living in a different world where people are doing and living their lives in a different sphere and no longer in the economy. And so people still try to be somebody in the economy. So people still try to find the job of their dreams, as it was said, or they try to find happiness in the traditional family. They try to find that happiness that was defined in the 20th century, and that not only never really worked, like you don't know anybody that was truly happy following those conditions, but also it's impossible to achieve right now. It's absolutely impossible to achieve because no matter who you are within the economy, people are elsewhere. And the example that I think better explains this is how angry society is with influencers.
Yeah.
And how there is this notion that they don't deserve all the attention that they're getting, and they're like parasites that don't do anything with their lives, and then they get lots of clicks and
They make a lot of money by doing nothing.
yeah, but it's pretty amazing because there's a market for attention. It's a market. So people decide to give their attention to whoever they want in the
Yes.
same way that people decide to buy whatever watch or whatever car or whatever brand they want to buy. Nobody questions if Nike or Adidas are worthy of their clients or not. And yet we hate these influencer people. And the reason why we hate these influencer people is that they force us to look straight into this divergence. Like there are lots of people, like pretty much the entire middle class, still trying to win at the old game, at the game of getting a good job and like a career and a family and a house on the beach and all of that. And that doesn't work anymore. And then they see all of these people that are like dressed extravagantly and try to keep everybody's attention all the time. And they're like, how can that person get better things that I do, that I've been like working hard my ass off all these years, and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And so that's the same thing for young people. Young people, I think, have it really hard. People like in their 20s now, because they intimately understand what I'm saying. They understand 100% that the path that's been designed for them leads nowhere, that there is no success possible in the corporate world, in a career, that those are fantasies from their parents. And yet they don't see another path, and they don't see another way of getting out of that. And of course that leads into massive mental health problems. And another thing that's very indicative of this is how many people want to escape. Like the people that want to live in vans. I've seen people living in their cars, the tiny house movement. There's like even the tradwives movement. These are all people that want to escape the design that's been put in place for them.
Yeah. That is so fascinating that you connect those dots together, because it's true, like so many people want to do these escape living styles. And I also think that sometimes we feel very much we feel lonely, and we feel like this is our fault, because it's just like, well, society works like this. And at the same time, well, you see maybe some still succeeding in the corporate world, or because it's kind of that transition that you feel that something is off, but at the same time you still have to pay the bills, you still have to pay the rent, you still have to figure it out like, right now. And there are still some companies paying really high salaries, and at the same time, it's not really maybe going where you thought it would be going. And it's just that chaos that we don't know, how do we do this?
Yeah. I think loneliness is the price we pay for breaking with the old. And I feel very lonely too.
Right.
And the people that I follow that are like breaking the rules also feel very lonely.
Yeah.
Because conformity, we conform to be with other people,
Yeah.
So the more you conform, the more surrounded by other people you're going to be.
Yeah.
But that brings other things. Like you might not feel lonely, but then you feel fear or you feel anger.
Yeah.
So yeah, I understand the loneliness. I'm hoping at one point there'll be like critical mass, like there'll be enough of us
The tipping point.
everywhere, like that
Yeah.
we'll find each other. Like you and I,
Yeah.
we have found each other.
Yes.
But until that point, I have chosen to be lonely rather than angry. I don't want to be angry.
I love that. Lonely rather than angry. So where do you think is that happiness? Is it being lonely?
I think I have found out about this very late in my life because I was raised into such a productive mindset that I was always working for some other greater good.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that creates a lot of pain for everybody because one very important part of being human is to express oneself. So
Big one.
people need to let it out, because of this thing, like what I started talking about, how I think of the human brain as a producer of emotions that are too complex to fit into words.
Yeah.
So if you look at human experience very closely, what you see is that the pain that we have comes from trying desperately to connect with other people without the means to connect. So we have this brain that is full of ideas, of emotions, of memories, of feelings, of sensations, and we try to communicate them because we want to find that other person and do not be lonely. But the things that we have, in particular words, are not enough to convey the whole of human experience. And if we don't try, like if we keep it to ourselves, if we say, okay, this is not enough, and so I'm going to keep my own world to myself, that is super painful. So what other ways do we know that help us connect with other people? Through art, through music, through human touch, through sculpting, through singing, through all of these are ways in which we find connection with other humans. Through writing a poem, through even through reading something together and then sharing it. And so if I had to suggest something that's making me very happy, in my case, it is to write. I have found a world in that. But I've also been exploring what other people did for the same purpose. And, like poetry, you read poetry and it is obvious that this is a person trying to convey something that she couldn't convey or he couldn't convey in any other way. And trying to connect on a different level that we're not so used to. So if you want happiness, like this feeling of being like having a full plate, I would say create something. Doesn't matter what it is. Doesn't matter if it's perfect. Can be a building if you're an architect, or it can be but something that talks about yourself.
We were just mentioning connecting on a different level. What do you mean by that?
It comes down to that notion. I mean, you can think of the brain as a piano. Okay. So the brain has something like 90 billion neurons.
Okay.
And we know that each of these emotions that we're talking about, like the emotion home or the emotion horse or apple or dad or whatever, they light up a group of these neurons, like a collection of these neurons. So you could think of the brain as a piano that has 90 billion keys. And you can think of these emotions as chords, like when you press several keys at the same time, 3 or more keys at the same time. So imagine that in your brain, there is a constant symphony, a constant symphony playing that is more complex than any piece of music that you've ever heard.
Okay.
And now you can't possibly play that for anybody else because you can only hear it yourself.
Yes.
So the drama and the secret and the mystery of human experience is living with that symphony and then desperately needing somebody else to understand that symphony with you, which is impossible. Right. And so the history of human development is the history of a group of beings trying to be better at that, trying to find new ways to tell that story that's playing in our brains all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And there are many ways in which we have tried to do this. We have pretty much left it behind, but music and singing together is clearly a way of communicating and connecting, literally connecting. You're singing in a group and you feel connected to those people.
Yeah.
Or like the reason why music gigs are so popular, concert shows, is because of that emotion that you feel, that sense of being connected to the entire auditorium, to an entire group of thousands of people, because you're singing together and like your brains at that time, your conscience at that time is connected to the conscience of everybody else. And you can feel that, like, that connection, that moment in which you are exactly connected with everybody else. And you can find that in religion too, in religious practices. Like what people do in churches serves the same purpose of feeling together, connecting our consciousness and our experience. You can see it in Buddhism, like the meditation practices, but you can see it also in any Catholic church. Anywhere.
And do you think that that's why also we are, since maybe the religion side of these stories don't really serve us so much anymore, but we're still longing for that kind of connection, we are going towards more of these spiritual practices, maybe more consciousness, awareness, all these things?
Yeah, I can't help but thinking, and this is very hard to prove or to find data to back it up, but that one of the things that's hurting us so much right now is the lack of communal experiences, like the lack of that experience of bringing people together, because it's almost frowned upon. Like you can see it in how often city councils want to ban music shows and festivals because they think like they're an expression of something that shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
And or how we have erased any sign of spirituality out of our lives, like it's almost frowned upon or laughed upon, because we have deemed these things unnecessary when they are really very necessary. And you can see them like emerging in many ways, like the experience of people clubbing in Berlin are spiritual. Like anybody that's ever been to a club or a techno festival knows, that's it's a communal experiences that connects you to other people, not through rational thinking, but through the experience of being there and sharing the same feelings at the same time. I'm also very intrigued about how the horoscope and the signs, zodiac signs, are like overtaking the entire world everywhere.
I know, it's crazy.
And again, it's like people are finding ways to connect,
Mm-hmm.
ways to make sense of the world,
Mm-hmm.
um, that are whose codes are not in the hands of somebody else, so that where they can manipulate the codes. I think that is what also spirituality offers, is less regulated way of understanding the world, one that
Yeah.
allows for more flexibility,
Yeah.
something.
It goes maybe a bit into what you write in one of the articles of the Society of Explorers, that is the 21st century society. Can you explain that a bit? I thought it was super beautiful.
Yeah, that is my Roman Empire, because I was a hacker, and there is this one book that talks about this. I can't recommend it strongly enough. It's called The Hacker Ethic, and it's online. You can. It's like open source, so you can download it.
Of course it.
Um, Hackers have an ethic of discovery, so they're driven by their desire to discover new things and to work on new things and to by intellectual hunger, say. And in the same way, like mathematicians are, or physicists, or many fields of knowledge are driven by the same desire to know more and to explore and to discover. And I think this is also what makes us human. Like when we developed this ability to project into the future, we also developed the curiosity to go there. And that is what drove us out of our countries and across the sea to find other continents. And that is what drove us out of the planet and into space to find other worlds. And if you observe children, like if you leave a group of children in a park, of any age, doesn't matter, they can be 1 year old or 6 months old, or they can be 14, and they're always going to be the same. They're going to go explore, they're going to go see what's around us. If certain people stop doing that, is because through education we are told that the world is a scary place and you could get hurt if you go too far away, and that it is safer to stay where you are. But our primary drive is really to go and see what's there. Like,
And why do you think that is? I think that's fascinating.
I think it's because we developed that ability to think about the future. But I also think there's something, I can't prove this, but I believe there's something related to us being nomads. So humans are like hunter gatherers, right? So we're always on the move. And being on the move means anticipating what's going to come tomorrow and having that capacity to think, tomorrow I'll get to this place and then I'll camp there, or it makes sense to camp there instead of camping here. And if you think about it, that notion of being in motion, like I think about my own body, and I feel bad if I have to stand still. Like if I can't leave my house because it's raining or because I hurt, I twisted an ankle or whatever. Like it starts to build up, and you kind of need to move. There's this need to be on the move. You can see that too in the different phases of human existence. Like while we are on the move, like while we are growing up, or while we are trying to get to a point of in our careers, or we are raising children, when we are on the move, moving towards something, we're usually happy and content.
Mm.
We have to be static in a place because we've done everything that we were supposed to do and we have nowhere to go. We become very bitter and very angry all of a sudden. You can see this in companies as well. If you let people stay in the same position for too long, so long that they don't have a goal to move towards to anymore, they become resentful and bitter and angry every single time.
Of course.
I saw this definition of happiness that I loved somewhere, and it said, happiness is to move towards a goal with a group that you feel you belong to.
Mm.
So
Wow.
to have a purpose and to move towards that purpose with a group that you think you belong to, that you belong to. I think that's the essence of our happiness. We need to be. It doesn't mean that we need to be necessarily progressing, like
Mm.
uh, in the sense of like going constantly to like a higher and higher place. For many years, people went around in circles, in the circles of the seasons, and but they were on the move. They were
Mm.
moving towards the next Christmas, the next season, harvesting season, the next. They were on the move, and they were on the move, of course, towards heaven and the good life with God and all of that. But this society in which we feel like we're not going anywhere, and I think that is a defining trait of our current society, that we don't know where we're going, that brings a lot of pain and a lot of suffering to the human mind. We need to be moving somewhere.
Right. No, I love that we are beings to be constantly on the move, and that makes us happy. You were already mentioning being creative, doing something that expresses our inner piano.
Well,
That's like,
yeah.
I love that. How do we do that in this new world? Because you also talk about the economics, right? The paradox of profitability. Um,
Productivity.
yes, sorry. How can you explain that a bit?
Yeah. Um, the thing is, even though it hasn't been on the front page, or it's not on the front page of newspapers as much as it should be, um, the economy of the past 25 to 30 years has been hasn't been working as expected. So the story that we tell ourselves is that since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, um, the human capacity to organize labor and capital, so the human capacity to organize production, um, gave us something called productivity, which was like the ability to make more with less every time. So um, in 1750s, hey, the 18th century, to make, this is a story that Adam Smith tells in a very famous book that is called The Wealth of Nations. To make a pin, like the one that you use for like clothing or whatever. Pins, by the way, were a super important part of society back in the day because there were no zippers or
Oh,
Velcro or anything like that. So lots of things in life would be like pulled together by a pin. Pins were used to keep your clothes on, to keep your purse in you, to keep like to keep your money purse closed, like for many many things. So to make a pin, this tiny little metallic thing, a very skilled man needed to do lots of things. Like they needed to bring a piece of iron, they needed to make it so thin that it could be a pen, then they needed to break it, then they needed to make like the head of the thing, whatever was needed. But through a better organization of that process in between many men and many machines, the same person that was making, say, maybe 8 to 10 pence a day could suddenly make 10,000 as part of a production line, right? And so this industrial time began where people were making more and more pins with the same effort over time, and that was what drove growth
Mm.
throughout 300 years. And that is how we went from being a species that was quite literally dying of hunger in the 18th century, like dying of famine, illness, everything, to the world that we know now, that is full of roads and hospitals and mobile phones and podcasts. So it was that idea of increased productivity, of the increased capacity to make more things with less resources through intelligence and through technology, that we are who we are. If
Right.
this hadn't happened, if productivity never exploded the way it exploded in the last 300 years, the most likely outcome is that you and I wouldn't be here today.
Right.
Because back in 1750, it was something like half of the kids died before they turned 10. So the population that we have today wouldn't exist. Our species wouldn't be the species that we know. The world would be a complete different place. That little thing of increasing our capacity to make more with less is what brought us here.
Mm.
So around 2013, the Bank of England started noticing that productivity was not growing anymore. So the thing that brought us here, the thing that made our lives possible, the thing that made possible that you and I don't have 15 children and die giving birth to one of them, is not working anymore. And the economists believe that it's not going to work again. It's not coming back. So what they believe is happened is that for most of history, like 99.9% of our existence on this earth, productivity had been flat. So the world hadn't changed. The life was the same from one generation to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. Then for some reason it spiked. Productivity went like this. And this is when we saw all of the advancements of human reality. And now it's flattening again. And it's not going to change again. The consequence of this is that everybody's panicking, really. Everybody's panicking because that's the story that we had been telling ourselves, that we talked about at the beginning. So we have been telling ourselves that the world was going to keep growing and growing and growing and growing forever, and that everybody would have the chance to jump on that bandwagon sooner or later. So even if you were poor, even if you were from a poor country, everybody was going to have the chance to jump onto that and to become successful and wealthy and have all the opportunities. And so what the economists are saying is that it's not going to happen. This is what we have. The world's not going to grow again, and we're stuck. Politicians don't want to acknowledge this, of course. So what they're trying to do is, on the one hand, they're trying to do what's it called, CPR, like trying to bring life back into the system, see if they can, by giving it more incentives, if they can accelerate the process again and bring growth back again. That's what Joe Biden did, for example, in the United States. He spent, I don't know, 500 billion. I think it was something like $500 billion trying to reactivate that economy. It is also what the European Union is doing, and it is what the Chinese government is doing. And then other people, other political parties are doing something else, which is they they can see that people get the message that the world is not growing anymore. There are no longer lots of opportunities for everybody. There are no longer like jobs to catch just out of anywhere that are going to pay more and more and more every year. They can see that is not happening. And what they're saying is the world is scarce and we had to fight for whatever there is left. And this is where the extreme right comes along. And this is where all forms of tribalism around the world come along. And they're saying there's very little to share, to split. And only the ones that are the chosen ones are going to get a share of this. The result is things like nowadays, like these particular week months, we're hearing a lot about immigration and how several political parties are threatening to deport millions of immigrants, or not even immigrants, just people of different colors. And this is what's underneath that message in the end. So the message underneath is there is not enough for everybody. There is only enough for a section of the people. And you have to fight the other social groups for the right to be the person that gets the benefits of what's left. And these all has to, like, it all goes back to this notion, to this very obscure economic idea that doesn't work anymore, which is that productivity is not growing. They don't know why.
And do you know why? Is this also because of the abundance that we are maybe stepping into? We were already mentioning energy abundance with AI, abundance of knowledge. Our whole economic system, everything that we know from past economics thinking, is always based on scarcity, right? So now if we enter into an era where things are just suddenly abundant, profitability maybe is not so easy to gain anymore. So is that maybe a reason, or why do you think that is happening?
I think I've been studying this for the past 5 years, and I think it is precisely for that reason. Profit depends on scarcity. So the reason why the industrial system was capable of extracting profit was because things were scarce. And the reason why things were scarce was that the knowledge to produce those things was restricted.
Yeah.
Very restricted to a handful of countries and a handful of companies and institutions within those countries.
Yeah.
But when things become abundant, you can't extract profit from them. You can't trade. That's like when knowledge was shared for the whole community in the year 1000, there was no trade. Now, the thing is that our political structures and the narrative, the story that we're telling ourselves, still comes from the old story of infinite growth. And this is where stories also serve as vessels for power dynamics, because in the same way that in Egypt, the pharaoh was a descendant from God. That was the story that they told themselves, right? So the pharaoh was a god, and everybody had to obey them because it was a god, and that allowed the pharaoh the power to hold on to power without having to torture too many people. So in the same way, the story that we tell ourselves about infinite scarcity, infinite growth in scarcity, is, I think, cementing the rights of the people that were there to reap those benefits back in the 20th century. But one thing that people, my generation and your generation, feel, I think, is that we're constantly creating value. We're constantly doing the best that we can. We're constantly connecting, and we can feel it. Like we feel that many of the things that we do are really valuable for society as a whole, not just us, but the group of people that we belong to. And they go completely unnoticed and completely ignored by the mainstream. So you have all of these people in TikTok creating content, sharing the most amazing ideas, pushing forward fields of science or fields of human understanding that you had never seen in your life. And nobody pays attention to them anywhere. They're not rewarded for that in any way. And at the same time, they live a life of extreme scarcity because they still have to pay for their house. And this is where housing also enters the equation, because housing, which currently accounts for 50% of all the wealth of the world, is our
Wow.
house, is the place we live. It is the mechanism through which the old story, the story of infinite growth, like the story that we were always going to get better jobs, better lives within that world of productivity. That part of housing is where the extraction of value occurs, because these people that own the houses say, hey, you have to pay 2,000 euros for this. We're not going to pay you anything for creating content that advances the world 10 times over, but you do have to pay for the house.
Right.
And that is where people feel this is not right. This is not right. The things that I have to do with my life are not right. It doesn't make any sense that I have to go into an office and pretend like I'm doing something all day, when I know that when I really do something of value is out of my office, out of the place where I work. And it doesn't make any sense that the owner of the business, just because they're 50 or 60 and they got to buy this house 30 years ago, gets 70% of my income. Doesn't make sense.
No. No, it really doesn't. It really doesn't. And well, what do we do then? What's the next step for us?
Well, I think there are like three things that are fundamental. One of them is to talk about this plutonomy and how so many things, so much value that the economy could account for 20 years ago and was recognized as value because the economy could account for it, is now being created out of the economy.
So do you see, sorry, just a quick question there. So do you see then that we're gonna move out of the economy? How is a post-growth economy based on abundance gonna look like?
I think we're not going to move out of the economy. I think it's going to become a smaller part of our lives, in the same way that religion didn't disappear when the industrial society came along. It only moved to a corner of life. So it was a small part of life. So the way I see it, and the way I see it happening right now, not in any near future, but the way you see it happening right now is that 20 years ago, if a person your age got a job, that was their only thing. And whatever they did in the economy was their only thing.
Right.
But now, even if you get a job, the same job, for you, it is never going to be your only thing in this life. So the economy is, in fact, becoming a smaller part of people's lives. And what's emerging is that people have another part of their lives that, for some, it might just be sharing their life with their friends in social networking. For other people, might be creating content and being a public service. But one amazing thing is that, for instance, If you go and create content that is, say, you're an educator, you teach math. If you go and teach math for an NGO in some school, you get a tax deduction. But if you go and teach math in YouTube, and you probably reach a lot more people, you don't get anything.
No.
And what's more amazing is that you don't even get the social recognition that you would get if you go to an NGO to teach math in deprived schools.
True.
It's crazy.
Crazy.
But this is like from the point of view of the establishment. But I think from the point of view of regular people, this is already happening. Like the economy is taking less and less and less and less space of their lives. And many people are making decisions on making less money to have more time to be out of the economy for another reason, which is that being in the economy and dedicating too much time to that part of your life makes you less valuable as well. So if you get a job right out of college, you spend the next 10 years of your life doing the same thing, you're going to lose value in this society. You're going to be less connected. You're going to be less agile. You're going to be less up to date. You're going to be less fresh and less capable in the end. So many people are going for less money, less economy, and more time to do other things, even if they want to monetize those other things later on, which is absolutely fine. So I think that's what's going to happen, that the economy is going to take up less and less and less and less of people's lives. And I think what is currently happening is that because that is occurring, the old economy is trying to siphon money through housing. Housing is going to be the topic of the next 10 years because it's not about where you live, but also where you keep your wealth, and you're going to need your wealth for things in life. So it all depends on how that works out. If there is a solution, a balance about housing and it's contained at least, then I think like a plutonomy will emerge out of and it will be all powerful, and the economy will still exist, but only for a part of life, like for the things where it actually adds value. One of them is for big the big projects, infrastructure projects. You cannot expect that to be resolved in between people that easily. But lots of things that it's already happened. Like there are these many things that my parents, music to information to shopping decisions to tourism to banking to lots of things that they solved in the economy and were solving without the economy already. And I think there would be several ways in which we could find a balance so that it's not a complete crash in between two stories, that there is not a cliff in between two stories. One of the things that I have proposed is to create funds, in in Norway.
Yeah.
Norway was a country that was a poor country, and at some point 30 years ago, or 40 years ago, they discovered that they had oil in their coast. And what the Norwegian government did that no other government had done before was to create a fund that splits the profits of the oil among the Norwegian population. So one of the solutions that I can think of to all this is to do that, but with cities. So to tax the people that make money out of cities, out of rent, out of tourism, out of anything that is related to just having a square meter in a city, and turning that into a kind of fund that distributes that wealth. That would be an idea to avoid the radical confrontation.
Right.
in between.
Would you see it distributed in ways like UBI, for instance, universal basic income, or in what ways?
I think the problem with universal basic income is that so far it lacks the consensus, because people don't want a system that rewards everybody equally.
Yeah.
That's but I think it could be distributed in a different way. For instance, you have a
Mm-hmm.
city, and in this city there are people that contribute to the city.
Yeah.
So like students contribute to the city. If you come here, the city has decided that if you come here to study, you're adding to the city, to the vibe of the city, to the spirit of the city, to new ideas coming here, to new businesses starting here. So we
Mm-hmm.
want to bring students. So let's pay students to come. Let's create this fund, and let's say to every student that comes to one of our universities that they're going to get a part of the profits of this fund.
Well, like in
Germany
Denmark,
has been. Hmm?
Denmark, I think has they provide a salary to students that are studying there. Even if I would decide to go, and yeah, I could also earn a salary there just for
Exactly.
studying.
You could do the same for entrepreneurs. So you say, okay, you're going to start a business. You're getting a part of this fund every year as long as you meet these milestones. So I don't know about universal, because I feel that there's not a consensus towards making it
Mm-hmm.
universal, but I'm pretty sure it could be like that. And also people could buy a stock in this fund. Say, like they could, for instance, turn on the house that they rent out and say, okay, I'm going to put this house into the fund, and the fund will rent it out, and now I'm going to get a profit out of this fund forever, or as long as I want to keep my stock in there. So the universality of it is not what I am most concerned. What I'm most concerned about the economy right now is that it rewards the things that we don't want to reward. So we want a society that's full of entrepreneurs, but we reward housing bubbles and housing and rents. And it gets to a point where it is more profitable to buy houses and rent them out than to start businesses.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a recipe for disaster, no matter how you look at it. It is a recipe for disaster economically, socially. It's catastrophic. So let's get out of that cycle. How do we do that? By thinking of ways where we put the rewards where they should be again. And, and this is what other successful cities have done. Like if Silicon Valley had such an ecosystem for startups, it was because their rewards were there. So that if you started a startup in Silicon Valley, you were going to find the resources for that and the recognition for that.
Right.
Silicon Valley would have never been that if if it was more profitable to rent houses than to build startups.
Right.
And the investing money was going there,
Yeah.
would not happen.
No.
In fact, it is a sign of a very aging society when this starts happening. And I also think that's a big part of what's happening is that our society that was mostly built in between 1950, the end of the war, and 1980 something is aging. And that's a phase that we have to go through, I guess.
Yeah. And so you were also mentioning in one of the articles the male struggle now that men are having less jobs than women, and we're still reinforcing though the narrative, or at least like society still is running on the narrative that men are the ones providing And once we took away that from them and they're not capable of providing anymore because there are no jobs for them, of course, there's a lot of frustration and anger. How are we not talking about this? And can you explain this maybe a bit more?
Yeah. Well, I think one thing that is often overlooked is that we're doing the entire gender adjustment. So there's been gender inequality for 2,000 years or 4,000 years, or as long as we can measure. And we're adjusting that and getting it to a new balance, but we're doing it all in the space of one generation. So one generation or two generations of the men are going through the entire adjustment of thousands of years of inequality. And that's left them with very little room for their own development.
Right.
So kids, girls of my generation, we were taught and we were, there was the demand that we became very competitive professionally. And so in the space of one generation, the amount of people competing for the same jobs has doubled.
Right.
And well, that makes all the sense. Someone should have been looking into the consequences of that for the population that was there before. Because I reject the notion that men should pay for the inequalities of the times of their grandparents.
Same.
I see my friends, and they are as patriarchal as I am. So we were raised in the same system. We have the same things that we have to work on as on them. But I see that they have this very, very little room to maneuver, while I have lots of possibilities and lots of different things that I could do with my life and lots of different opportunities that were not there 10 years ago. And so for them, it's a lot harder, and we shouldn't let go of that idea. But what's underlying all of this, I think, is that we are moving because of the design of the industrial society. We're moving from a society that rewards effort into a society that rewards success, or that rewards capturing the interest of other people. And men were taught to the very last of their days that their entire value relied on their efforts.
Right.
So they're basically, this masculinity is this idea of sacrifice. You can see that in other discourses, even now, what like the Jim Bros and everybody that's talking about discipline, suffering. That is their core notion is you suffer because suffering makes you masculine. And this idea of the strong man, strength is a measure of suffering as well. Like you trying to lift this super heavy thing, all of that. Now, that is on the way out. We are no longer with technology, with artificial intelligence, with abundant energy. We're no longer in a world that requires people because of their strength. There's this line that is very sharp. I think it says, we came from a world that required our muscles, went into a world that required our brains, and are moving into a world that requires our hearts. Or from a world of muscles to a world of brains and to a world of hearts. So we're moving into an era of emotions, and we're all trying to connect with one another. And in that world, someone's ability to sacrifice themselves or to suffer has very little value. And So men will have to walk a very long, very hard way until they find another place for them in the world. Um, and it's totally understandable that they don't want to just become women, that they don't want to follow the same paradigm, and we wouldn't want that either. But I think we should have more empathy for what men, not just the angry ones, but all of them are doing today, because it's really, really hard. And I see them doing it. I see so many men talking about their condition. Like, this is relatively new. It's been there for maybe a couple of years, but it's there. And even the ones that are like preaching discipline and all of that. Well, okay, we might not agree, but they're talking about what manhood is for the first time in history. And they're talking about how to do better with that.
That's beautiful. And I love that we're talking about this, because I think there is a lot of lack of awareness, and yeah, just we are all a bit lost, right? Also, I think as women, maybe also you have an opinion on our femininity, because I also think that what you just said, we stepped into the work environment and tried to compete with men, and I think we also adapted a lot of these male traits and male ways of competing, that maybe also we have also an opportunity to question more of our femininity.
Yeah, I would love for women to be more critical of our own traits and toxic traits, because I do think that we have a lot of them. I do think that systems of inequality or systems of oppression work in both ends. And I think it would be a lot more constructive if we could have that conversation, like bring up what it is in us that makes us part of the problem. And at the same time, I can understand that some women have been so mistreated.
Yeah.
And they have suffered so much
Pain. Yeah.
that they're not in a position where they can forgive yet. Or they can not forgive, maybe not forgive, but they can like calm down their nervous system for a little so we can have these conversations. And I can see that in many debates. But yeah, but I see a lot of progress. I think TikTok is like the best thing that's happened to the world since the web. And I mean, there you can see so many perspectives, so many people that you would have never heard of talking, answering their part in saying their piece. And I think it will move faster than we think.
Yeah, I love that. Talking about moving faster, what do you think we're gonna see in the next 5 to 10 years? Where are we going?
I think we're going to go through a period of even more disillusionment. I think these political parties that are raising, or not political parties, these voices that are coming up, trying to give answers to those people that are angry because the narrative doesn't fit the reality anymore. They're going to fail people because they're not being true to anybody. They're just trying to make profit out of it. And that will lead people into even more frustration and disillusionment and confusion. I also believe, and I have claimed it several times, that we're facing, we're walking towards another financial crisis. Because if we agree that the Industrial Revolution was only the product of a very specific point in time, then we can see how what we have been doing for 30 years or something was to pump more gas, like to try to give it more power, see if it keeps working, but it's like diminishing
Yeah.
over time. And every time that we pump too much gas into the machine, like it happened in the past 5 years since the pandemic and all the stimuli from everywhere, it ends up bursting.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it bursts, you're left behind with that sense of extreme anxiety and fear that we had post 2008, where there's no future again. What am I going to do? Am I going to still be someone? Can I feed my family? Can I keep my place in society? All of those things start to emerge. And so that's why I started writing, really. And I'm publishing a book in a couple months to try to offer some answers and some explanations and like a lifeline into the people that might feel lost in this ocean, no, in this place of darkness. And at the same time, I have a lot of trust in the agency that I see in some people. Like I was talking at the beginning about courage and how it is what we need. What we need is courage. And the idea that we are going to get a much better life by trying and failing at many different things than trying not to fail ever. So the attempt to never fail can only lead to a miserable life, no matter what happens. Well, trying something new is really our only way. Trying and trying and trying until something works. So I see that in many people, the ones that go live in vans and the ones that start podcasts. And I'm hoping we will find some sense of belonging. You know, like we need a brand around us. Like we are these people. We're the people that are trying to move in this direction, and that suddenly we can see each other and recognize that even if that person's talking about, I don't know, food or style or dancing or patriarchy, but we all belong to the same group of people that is trying to push the world forward.
Beautiful. So you think, connecting also back to the beginning, that we should be starting businesses around that? This is where it's needed. Connection.
Like what I'm going to tell my kids when they're old enough
Yes.
is that they should start a business like at age 14 because it is the way it is a way to relate to the world, to connect to the world as well. It doesn't have to be selling things of Temu or anything like that. um, you can start a business that has a lot to do with yourself. Things that I recommend constantly to my friends are like start a consultancy, tell your story. There's lots of people there that want to hear about your particular expertise. Or if you work in healthcare, just do it, do massages, do therapy, do whatever you do. Don't do it for somebody else, do it yourself. Learn to have clients, learn to get to agreements, learn to offer value, incorporate that into your life, because that's something that you're gonna keep into your life forever. And because of the way that the economy works, but there's so much money in the world right now, like money, actual money,
Yeah.
that it is really easy to make a living out of having something like that. It doesn't have to be the I see lots of people in TikTok doing lots of different things, from showing patterns, like they design pants and then they sell the pattern and they help you do it, to online classes, whatever makes you happy, and make the happiness part the center of the business. Like, I do this because it makes me happy, because it's what I want to do, because it's what I want to do with my life. If you want to live in the woods, go buy a house somewhere and have people go over, create an Airbnb, have people over a couple of times so that you can pay your expenses, write articles, I don't know, create a vineyard and sell the wine for subscriptions. There are endless opportunities for doing something with your life. And no matter how they end, they're going to make you better, more prepared, more capable. They're going to be an investment like nothing else. Please, young people, don't do another master's degree. That's taking you nowhere. I've done too many hiring. Like, I've been involved in too many hiring processes in my life. Another master's degree is not going to impress anybody.
It's not gonna do make you choose someone over someone else.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Noted.
Another thing, if you're starting, I think, is that B2C businesses, so when your client is a regular person, are a lot easier if you're very young than B2B.
Right.
Because companies in general are old. Companies can have an age too. Old companies don't deal well with young people.
Yeah.
They come from two different mindsets.
I experienced that myself.
Yes.
Yeah. Very true.
But regular people are very attracted to the possibilities of young ideas and young minds. So, like, I should probably start a school to brainstorm these kind of things with
I
young
think
people.
so.
There
I
are
think that
so
would
many
be
things.
I think so. That's very much needed, I think. In this new world we're making, which brings me to the next question, one of the last ones. What is for you then this new world in the making? It can be just a sentence, a word, an explanation. I don't know.
So for me, the world in the making is a world of abundance. Is a world in which we're not constrained by scarcity anymore. And that comes with lots of like opportunities. Like, the first one and most evident is the possibility of a good life for everybody. So we don't have to compete to live a good life anymore. But it also comes along with challenges, because our entire social hierarchy relies on scarcity and how we deal with scarcity. So it's a world in which we have a lot to gain, but also lots of things to work on.
Yeah, I am very interested in seeing this new world developing into abundance. And I 100% agree. I would love to. I have so many more questions, but I think maybe we leave it to another podcast. Maybe when your book comes out,
Sure.
we can have another one. Maybe something that you would like to add, something that has surprised you lately before we go to the last question.
No, I think it's been a very good like roundup of all the things that are happening. Just that, nothing else. No?
Okay, cool. And what would be a question that you would like the listeners to think about, maybe ask themselves, something that you ask yourself?
I think one question that we all have to ask ourselves right now is, if scarcity was not a problem, because it isn't, what would you like to do with your life? What would make you happy?
Wow, a big one, huh?
Yeah. And then whatever it is, know that your success in life depends on you being able to pursue that goal. So it's not just possibility, but also it is the key to being successful in this new world that is in the making.
Lovely. What an amazing way to end this conversation. Thank you so much, Maria. It was a pleasure, really. So many new ideas and just things to think about. It's, mind-blowing. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for having me. It's really encouraging to see people like you and another woman, as you said at the beginning, that has so many interests and is putting the time and the effort and the energy into creating this kind of content. So thank you for having me.
Thank you.